Hello, my name is Sarah Scott. I'm a licensed professional counselor based out of Houston, Texas. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the cognitive behavioral therapy cycle, or as I like to call it, my thoughts, feelings, and action chart. This is the core of a lot of the therapy I do and the therapy that a lot of other counselors do. And it is a really helpful tool for helping to figure out why do we make the decisions we make. So the first step here that I've represented with an explosion is something happens. Now, obviously in therapy, a lot of the times we're talking about triggers, but it can literally be anything. And then after something happens, we react, right? We have a reaction that follows from something that happens to us. How do we deal with that? I like to call that the bread, right, of our sandwich. That's the outside piece that anyone with eyes can observe, but only you can help me fill in the peanut butter and the jelly on the middle of the sandwich. What goes on inside your heart before you react. So something happens, we have a thought that pairs with a feeling, and then we act on our feelings. Now, the really tricky thing is it is important to tease apart the differences between our thoughts and our feelings. And it's important to do it in that order, not to put the feelings before thoughts, which I'll get to why that's important in a minute. But first, I want to give an example of what this cycle might look like by telling you a story about my good friends Alice and Bob. So Alice is walking down the hallway at school. She sees her friend Charlie. She says, "Hi, Charlie." And Charlie doesn't say hi back. That's our event. Charlie doesn't say hi. And Alice thinks he hates me. And she gets her feelings hurt. She's angry at him. "What the heck, Charlie? I didn't do anything to you. Why didn't you say hi back?" So when she sees him at lunch, she gives him the cold shoulder. She doesn't say hi. She walks right past him and ignores him to teach him a lesson. Now, Bob is walking down the hallway. Bob sees his friend Charlie in the hallway. He says, "Hi, Charlie," and Charlie doesn't say hi back. And Bob thinks, he didn't hear me. And he feels neutral about it. He doesn't really think about it that much, whatever. And then when he sees his friend Charlie at lunch, he says, "Hey, man, what's up? Were you busy this morning? You didn't say hi." Alice has anxiety. Bob does not. And as I'm hearing these stories, right, what I hear in the thinking column for Alice is a thinking shortcut. She's doing something called mind reading, which is when we try to guess what the other person is thinking or feeling, but we might not be getting the right answer. Now, obviously, a little bit of mind reading is called empathy, and it's called thinking about other people's thoughts and feelings and putting ourselves in their shoes and being considerate. It's a good thing. We want to do a little mind reading. If we don't do any mind reading at all, we can be thoughtless or mindless or mean or accidentally selfish. That's not good. But what it sounds like to me is that Alice is assuming the worst case scenario. Maybe she's really angry at Charlie for ignoring her, so she projects that onto him and assumes he's mad at her because she's mad at him. Maybe she was bullied last year and her friend David gave her the cold shoulder for a whole month and didn't tell her why. So now when Charlie doesn't say hi, it wakes up that bad memory and she responds to Charlie not saying hi as if it was that situation with David. Um, or maybe, there's any number of things that can be driving that mind reading. And that's something that you try to tease out in therapy. And you say, okay, well, let's check the evidence. Why do you think Charlie is mad at you? Has this happened before? Did you guys have a fight? Did he have a mean expression on his face? What's going on? And figuring that out, we try to find new ways of looking at the situation that can loosen up our feelings, can help us explore the full depth of what's going on in that situation. And then we say, okay, is giving the cold shoulder back to Charlie going to fix the situation, or is that going to make things worse, right? What else can we do that might improve our friendship with Charlie if our goal is to be good friends with him? Now, the alternative there is our friend Bob, who doesn't have anxiety, and he says, "Oh, Charlie didn't hear me. Whatever. Hey, man, what's up?" Now, 9 times out of 10, that's all there is to it. It wouldn't even come up in therapy. But if that's a story I've heard before, right? Maybe Bob has a lot of situations with his friend Charlie where it seems like Charlie's not a very good listener. I might be asking him some questions. I might be investigating. Is he on that too little side of the mind reading chart? Is he not thinking about Charlie's point of view? I might be like, man, what's up with Charlie? He never seems to say hi to you. Are you like, what's going on? Do you think, is there something that happened? Do you think, right? Why is he doing that? A good friend would say hi. He never seems to say hi to you. And maybe we try to figure out, like, is Charlie actually my friend, or is he just someone that I like, right? Did we have a really good interaction once and now I think we're friends, but Charlie doesn't think we're friends? Did I accidentally do something that hurt his feelings and he is ignoring me? And it's very tricky because you don't want to be putting bad thoughts into people's heads and making them anxious. But sometimes if you hear that repeating pattern of, I'm trying to be friends, but people aren't very good friends back to me, it can be helpful to have someone to bounce back and forth and try to figure out, okay, what are some questions I can be asking? What are some details I can be looking for to try to figure out why this keeps happening? And of course, sometimes it's not our problem. It's just they aren't very good listeners. And then we figure out, okay, how do I be good friends with someone who's not a good listener? That's also something we can talk about in therapy. Now, I mentioned before it's important to do it in this order, with thoughts before feelings. And that is because if we flip it around, if we put our feelings before our thoughts, that can start to color our perceptions in a way that's not very helpful. And it can lead to impulsive behavior. The way I like to think about it is if you are in a road trip and we've got the driver's seat and the passenger seat. If emotion is in the driver's seat, if that is what comes first, if that's what's controlling us, then we are following our heart's desires, and that might not be very logical all the time, right? My heart is driving down the road and it sees a fare and it says, oh boy, I've got to pull over for that. It sees a big semi coming towards it and it says, oh my God, I'm about to be hit. And if logic is in the support seat, if it's supporting our feelings, then it's not checking those feelings. It's coming up with reasons why it's right. It's saying, beep boop, yes, you should pull over immediately for the state fair. We'll never get to go there again. It was only logical to go to the state fair regardless of our timing. You only live once. Or it might say, beep boop, yes, you are correct. The number of people who die in semi trucks accidents is extremely high. You should be scared of this situation. Most people I work with are pretty smart, they have very strong logical brains, so they're very good at coming up with reasons why their feelings are right, even if that's not always the truth of the situation. But we don't want logic to get in the driver's seat and then tie up our emotions and lock it in the trunk. Then we're just driving, we're going the most efficient route, and it might make logical sense. You can spell me out all the reasons why you're making these decisions, but it just doesn't seem like it's making you very happy because you're ignoring that very important data that our feelings give us of what we actually like and don't like. If I only make choices that are completely logical, that's how you wind up in marriages that are a bad fit, or in jobs that don't actually follow your passions, right? Or in colleges that just make you miserable. I can be making choices that are very logical, but if they don't take into account my feelings, it can wind up being really uncomfortable in the long run. So we want to have thoughts, then feelings, logic, then emotion. I want to think through, okay, what is the objective truth of the situation? And then how do I feel about it? I hope that makes sense. Now, there is a secret fifth step to this cycle, and I like to represent it with a pair of sunglasses. Kind of like the saying, rose-colored sunglasses, right? If someone's got their rose-colored glasses on, everything is pink and beautiful and happy and optimistic. And if someone has dark glasses on, everything is gloomy and mopey, right? This glasses represents our worldviews or our core beliefs. These are things that are formed very slowly over the course of our lifespan. They're held very deeply and they're felt reflexively. A lot of times we're not even really consciously aware of it, but they shape the way we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. So an example of a core belief might be, is there a God or not? Is the world fair or chaotic? Is the world safe or unsafe? Are other people basically kind or basically evil? Am I a lovable person? All of these are core beliefs that shape the way we see the world and kind of explain why two people can be in the same situation but have those very different thoughts. And the other tricky thing with core beliefs is that they are not something we can consciously change very easily. It's pretty easy to change your thoughts, right? Once you get the hang of it, you can notice when you're doing a thinking shortcut and say, okay, wait, pause. Is that actually true? Or am I responding to something from the past? Because sometimes those thinking shortcuts are correct and we want to act on them quickly. And other times we can be like, okay, this is one of my habits. I'm stressed out about something else. Let's deal with that. But I can't just wake up one morning and decide, you know what, I am a lovable person. Like, I have to either consciously work on changing that belief a little by little over a long period of time, or I have to have something really dramatic happen to me. A lot of times, what we're doing when we talk about core beliefs is just identifying them so we're aware of them. And then, if we do have a really negative core belief that might not be serving us very well, we can start that process of slowly changing it, or at least better understanding how did I come to have this belief. When I talk about core beliefs with people who struggle with depression, a lot of times we're talking about the depressive worldview. Now, most people over the course of their life will have a period of depression. It's very normal. It is a part of the human experience. For most people, it's triggered by a major loss or a big stressor in their life. And it'll be a period of low energy, low motivation, sadness, or anger. And it will spontaneously remit after a couple days, right? You get a breakup, you get a divorce, you're really low, you're really sad, you don't want to do anything, it's hard to go to work, it's hard to take care of yourself. And then after a week or so, you're like, all right, come on, let's go. And you start to get back to your baseline. But some people have very deep, long periods of depression that last for a very long time, or they'll have multiple periods of depression across their life. So researchers are wanting to understand, okay, is there something about people's core beliefs that makes them more prone to these depressive periods, or do multiple periods of depression affect your core belief system? And they came up with something called the depressive worldview, which kind of helps separate out people who are prone to those serious repeated episodes of depression from folks who might have one or two, but it's unlikely to be a lifelong struggle. And the depressive worldview is composed of three beliefs. To paraphrase, number one, the world sucks. Number two, it's all my fault. And number three, there's nothing I can do about it. And if you think about it, that makes sense. Because if it's any two of those beliefs, I can kind of cope with it, right? If the world sucks and it's all my fault, but I can do something about it, well, okay, I'm going to do something about it. If the world sucks and there's nothing I can do, and I can, but it's not my fault, I'm still probably going to be upset, but I'm not going to have that really characteristic self-loathing that you tend to see in depression. And if the world is great, right, and it's all my fault and there's nothing I can do about it, well, I might feel bad about my own personal situation, but I'm unlikely to be really deeply hopeless about everything in general. Um, and there will be enough good things going on in my life that I can probably deal with that low self-esteem a little bit better than average. So a lot of times when I'm working with folks, we'll try to identify, okay, what are some of those core beliefs? Do any of them match the depressive worldview? And then how can we start having experiences that counteract, that give us the evidence to prove that the world is, it's an okay place. It's not all my fault, right? I'm responsible for things, but not every single bad thing that's ever happened is my fault and I have to do something about it. But I can do something, right? I am an empowered person who can make choices. And if I really truly can't, it's like, okay, what do we have to do to reach that place where we can do something? That's very important. Now, going back over to our thinking shortcuts. If you look online for cognitive distortions or thinking errors, you're going to find different lists of 10 to 12. Um, you know, it's not like an exact science, it's just what's helpful clinically. I gave one example, mind reading, which would be an exaggeration of too much empathy from my point of view. Another common one is predicting the future. Again, obviously, a little bit of predicting the future is called thinking through the consequences of your actions, and it's a very good thing. But too much thinking about the future can either paralyze us because we're trying to figure out every possible outcome, or we might jump to the worst possible conclusion and become so fixated on preventing that we can't evaluate how likely it is to happen or envision more hopeful possibilities. So we want to try to see, okay, how do I look just far enough ahead that I'm able to make wise choices, but I'm not looking so far ahead or so negatively that I can't make any choices at all. One that I tend to struggle with is extreme thinking, which is always, never, everyone, nobody, thoughts that contain those extreme words. And those ones are actually fairly easy to flip around because once you know to listen for them in your inner monologue, you can be like, okay, wait, I'm doing the thing, I'm stressed out. I look for the exception. Not everyone hates me, right? And if I can find that exception, I can start to pause the spiral. I can deal with my feelings more effectively, and then I can use my coping skills rather than feeling overwhelmed by everything going on in my life. One that I want to explore in more depth in another video is something I call invisible rules. And those are expectations we hold of ourselves, the world, or other people that might or might not be accurate and can often drive us in ways that are not so healthy. The tricky thing is that some invisible rules are real, and if we break them, there are consequences. But a lot of invisible rules, the ones that start with have to or should, I have to get all A's. Well, no, you don't, right? There are consequences to getting A's, and some of those are very good, and I want them. And there are consequences to not getting A's, and I might want to avoid them. But I'm not going to go to jail if I get a B. I'm not going to ruin my entire life if I get a B. I'm not going to die, right? I want to get A's. I don't have to. I have to do the dishes right now. Like, okay, no, you don't. You're not going to go to jail. You're not going to die. Nothing bad is going to happen. There's going to be dishes in your sink, right? And that might make us feel anxious or worried, but we can sit with that feeling. We can figure out, okay, how do I act on this energy in a helpful way? So this little cycle is something I talk about with almost all my clients, like at least almost every session, not literally, but it comes up a lot. I'm drawing this chart on my whiteboard a lot during the day. And we try to break down, okay, what's going on in my life? How am I dealing with it? Is there a recurring trigger? Is there something going on that's really stressing me out? Are we able to figure out what those thinking patterns are that tend to recur for me? And sometimes we go deep. We try to figure out, where did I learn that thinking pattern? Why did it serve me then? And how is it hurting me now? Are there any recurring feelings? Like, am I someone who really struggles with intense sadness or anger or fear? And then there are some specific coping strategies for those different feelings. And then, like I said, the coping strategies. What am I doing about the situation? How do I take action and make a difference in my life? I hope that this has been a helpful summary of the CBT cycle. It is a really helpful tool, especially if you can use it in a flexible way where you can explore all those different nuances that go on in our brains. If you're interested in learning more, I'd ask you to reach out to me on my website, sarahscottlpc.com. That's Sarah with an H, Sarah, Scott, Scott, LPC.com. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.